The story of African Muslim slaves in 18th-century Suriname is a tale of quiet resistance, cultural resilience, and the struggle for spiritual survival under brutal conditions. During this period, Suriname was a Dutch colony with an economy heavily reliant on sugar, coffee, and cotton plantations. Enslaved Africans, many of whom were Muslim, were forcibly brought to Suriname as laborers, enduring the harsh realities of the plantation system. Many of the African Muslims in Suriname originated from West African regions, such as Senegambia, Guinea, and the Sahel, where Islam was well established. These enslaved individuals were torn from societies where Islamic practices were an integral part of daily life. Upon arrival in Suriname, they found themselves in a predominantly Christian environment where the plantation system sought to strip them of their cultural and religious identities. However, African Muslims demonstrated resilience by secretly maintaining their Islamic practices and cultural traditions despite the constant threat of punishment. Secret Islamic practices included the recitation of Quranic verses, praying in seclusion, fasting during Ramadan, and observing dietary restrictions according to Islamic law. They found discreet ways to perform their prayers, often using gestures to mimic the traditional postures of Islamic worship while appearing to be engaged in other tasks. Their ability to hold on to these rituals allowed them to sustain a sense of identity and community amidst the dehumanizing conditions of slavery. Muslim slaves also sought ways to transmit their knowledge of Islam to the younger generation, teaching them to recite Quranic passages and explaining Islamic teachings in secret gatherings. Oral traditions played a crucial role in preserving Islamic knowledge, as written materials like the Quran were often forbidden or destroyed by slave owners. In some cases, slaves found ways to inscribe Quranic verses on objects or create amulets with Arabic script, using these as spiritual protection. Despite these efforts, African Muslims faced numerous challenges in preserving their faith. The harsh conditions of plantation life, exhausting labor, malnutrition, physical abuse, and the separation of families left little time and space for religious observance. Additionally, the colonial authorities implemented policies aimed at converting slaves to Christianity, often using force or coercion to encourage conversion. Those who were suspected of practicing Islam or other African spiritual traditions risked punishment, which could range from physical beatings to more severe penalties. Resistance against these pressures sometimes took on more organized forms, including escape. Some Muslim slaves became Maroons, escaped slaves who formed independent communities in the rainforest. In these Maroon communities, elements of Islamic tradition sometimes mingled with other African spiritual practices, creating unique forms of religious and cultural expression. Maroon societies represented a form of active resistance to the plantation system, providing a space where escaped slaves could practice their cultural traditions with greater freedom. The legacy of African Muslim slaves in Suriname persisted even after the formal abolition of slavery in 1863. Elements of Islamic practice, such as names derived from Arabic, the use of protective amulets, and certain cultural rituals, continued to influence Afro-Suriname's culture. Although the original Islamic practices of the enslaved people often blended with other spiritual traditions over time, they left an indelible mark on Suriname's cultural landscape. The story of African Muslim slaves in 18th-century Suriname is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the determination to preserve cultural and religious identity under the most trying circumstances. Despite the efforts to suppress their faith, these enslaved Muslims found ways to navigate the brutal plantation system while secretly maintaining their Islamic practices, ensuring that their spiritual legacy would endure for generations.